So first, just before we get started, love to get a sense of where folks are calling in from. So if you want to type in the chat which city, which country you're joining us from, would be great to get a sense of where everyone is from. And we're also going to start a poll. So we want to understand, what do you find most challenging about leveraging earned media in your PR strategy? So what are your biggest challenges with earned media today? Is it measuring ROI? Is it generating quality coverage? Is it integrating AI tools? Or is it building strong journalist relationships? So you can go ahead and vote, and in a couple minutes, we'll share the results. Good to see folks coming in from Arizona. We've got Todd from Pennsylvania, Benjamin from Reno, and Darryl's all the way from Bournemouth, UK. I'm in Israel. We've got Hector from Mexico and Mark from DC. Great to see a very international crowd. Welcome, everyone. So if you just joined, we'd love you to share your biggest challenge with earned media these days in this poll. You should be able to see a pop-up on your screen. And just in another minute, we'll share the results, and then we'll get into the meat of the webinar. So Sonia, why don't we go ahead and close out the poll and take a look at the results so far. Okay, interesting. So measuring ROI, #1 problem or pain point in people's earned media efforts these days. Not a surprise. 47% saying measuring ROI, biggest challenge. Next was generating quality coverage, followed by integrating AI tools, and then lastly, building good journalist relationships. Interesting stuff. Darryl, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's probably not a surprise that measuring ROI comes out top. It's something that perennially people say is a challenge about PR. I run an agency called Hard Number, so I happen to think it can be done, but there are strategies and things like that you can put in place to do it. And I know from our use of Propel and that there are tools within the Propel and functionality that's available within Propel that enable you to do that as well.
Yeah, this makes me happy because as a media relations guy my whole career, that was my biggest frustration. That's why I actually sold my agency and created Propel, was to make PR measurable in terms of ROI, in terms of productivity. And Darryl is definitely of the same mindset, and that's why very happy to have you here today. So let's move on forward and get started. So for all those who just joined, again, welcome to our Propel webinar. We're going to be talking about earned media and AI and how brand narratives are being reshaped through all the innovation going on in our industry and in the world. Really excited to welcome our guest, Darryl Sparey, Managing Director, co-founder of Hard Numbers, a award-winning agency in the UK. It's a performance-driven agency, and Hard Numbers marries killer creative with commercial acumen to create campaigns that drive a demonstrable return on investment. So there we go, ROI. Unlike many agency founders, Darryl spent much of his career in business development. And after 10 years running sales and marketing for Precise, which is now Kantar Media, he moved into digital marketing, running the London office of a search engine marketing firm, then moved into PR as a board director of Hotwire, a large agency, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. And Darryl is a member of the CIPR, the PRCA, and AMEC. But his most important job is that of father to his children, Hudson and Hala. So welcome again, Darryl, to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Zach. I really appreciate you inviting me to be part of this today.
Awesome. So let's just take a quick minute to go over our agenda today. We're going to be talking about how PR pros and comms pros can integrate generative AI into their workflows, the importance of databases in our new AI landscape, strategies to measure and maximize ROI. And then Darryl's going to share some new insights from a report that he recently published at Hard Numbers, which we will get into in a little bit. So now I'm just going to give a really quick background of Propel and myself. So I am Zach Cutler, founder and CEO of Propel. As I mentioned earlier, media relations guy my whole career, was frustrated that there wasn't better technology for our industry, really wanted to make my agency more data-driven, and started to get the idea to create the first CRM for PR, or as we call it, PRM, Public Relations Management. So we launched the first ever PRM about 5 years ago. And fast forward to today, we have a full end-to-end PR platform, including the PRM, including the most accurate AI media database, AI media monitoring, and generative AI content, and a whole host of analytics on ROI and productivity. And we are the most affordable option on the market. Also, we are proud to be built by PR people for PR people. So we pride ourselves on that and working closely with customers. And yeah, we encourage you to check us out if you haven't already. So that's Propel. And now let's get into the good stuff. So talking about AI and PR workflows, obviously everyone knows that AI is revolutionizing how we work. And so Darryl, wondering some practical ways from your perspective on how comms pros can integrate AI into their workflows.
Yeah, sure. I think there are innumerable ways that AI can be integrated into PR workflows, and I'll give you some examples. But first, a couple of principles up front. I'm European, so obviously we like talking about regulation and and regulating businesses and things like that. And one of the first things we did at Hard Numbers was to create a social media policy document. We've publicly shared that, and I'm happy to share a version of that with anyone on this webinar as well. But it was important for us to establish a few key principles and rules of the road and rules of engagement for our staff. It included us saying to our staff to not put anything client sensitive in public AI tools, for example, not to use AI to generate content which would directly be used to satisfy media opportunities and things like that. In terms of practical ways that we're integrating AI into our workflows, there's loads of things. So using AI as a thought starter across a whole range of different things. So using AI to suggest 10 potential byline topic ideas for a client, or 10 questions that a journalist might ask a client in a particular sector. You'll find that usually 6 you've already thought of, 2 are total rubbish, but 2 might be genuinely useful ideas that you hadn't thought of previously. We use AI for pitching to both new and existing clients. We use generative AI to generate mock-ups for pitches for ideas and things like that. We work with a payments business called Volante, and their whole business is about speeding up payments between banks and their customers, basically. And so I wanted an image of the Flash from DC Comics running really, really fast across a bank, holding loads of money in his hand. And I couldn't Google and find an image, and I'm not clever enough to Photoshop together something like that. So I used AI, a generative AI platform, to create me 7 different versions of that image, and I picked one and I used it in our pitch deck. And we use that for loads of, like, bringing a creative idea to life. You know, what an outdoor activation might look like for a client, a whole raft of different things. But we'll use AI for pitching for prospective clients. You can use AI to help you repurpose bylines as well. If you've got a byline that I mean, we've all been there. If you've got a byline that you've pitched to 2 to 3 different outlets, you've got the first one done, you can use AI to just help you rewrite and make changes to to that original document. We use AI a lot in the new business function at Hard Numbers. So a couple of quick ways we do that. We use Fireflies to transcribe all of our meeting notes. And we then have a custom GPT that we've built to then create a reverse brief that take basically initial calls that we do with our prospects and turn them into a reverse brief. That process used to take me something like 45 to 60 minutes to just take notes from that I'd handwritten from a call and put them into a reverse brief. I now can turn that around in 5 minutes. So it just massively speeds up that process. We do the same for action items following client meetings with AI. Again, turns a 20 to 30-minute job into a 5-minute job. We're also experimenting with ways to use AI to speed up responses to media requests for comment by matching hashtag journo requests and the topics in them to things we know that our clients want to talk about and have content for, and then auto generate content for approval by our team and then distribution to the client and then the journalist. I know that Propel's working on a whole host of ways that AI can be used to speed up and improve PR processes for folks too.
Yeah, those are some interesting use cases, Darryl. And I mentioned this on our last webinar, but I've been playing around with Midjourney for image generation. Absolutely love it. I don't know what your tool of choice is for that, but I also just saw that OpenAI launched a video AI tool just a week or two ago. I haven't checked it out yet, but if you guys are curious, I encourage everyone to check it out. I'm sure it's interesting. Looks like it's more of a B-roll creation tool than a full-on, marketing or ad video creation, but still valuable and so on. Yeah, in terms of some of my favorites and some of the innovations we've been passionate about and building at Propel, I'd say top of the list, honestly, is AI personalized intros. So I remember at Cutler PR, my agency, that was a rule that we all had when we were pitching journalists was, look at their recent article or a couple of recent articles and pull out a couple of nuggets, 2, 3, 4 nuggets that we could then reference in the opening sentence of the pitch to really make the journalists feel that we did our homework. We're not spraying and praying, pitching them. And our response rate was so much better when we did that. And so we kind of reverse engineered that process into Propel in an automated way where, you can go in, you can select 5, 10, 30 journalists that you want to pitch and click add AI personalized intros, and boom, Propel is already looking at the recent article of each of those journalists. It's creating a sentence that will be inserted at the beginning of your pitch. And then we leave all of those in the drafts folder because we want you to review it. Maybe you want to tweak it a little bit, add something to it. But similar to what you were saying about your brief, it's saving people 90% of their time on that task, which is awesome. Also, one of the things that I always was frustrated by in monitoring was that, you get all these results for a client in the search or alert you set up from your Boolean query, and half of them are not relevant. You have to keep refining the query, but even then, it's pulling in a lot of irrelevant stuff. Now, you can just train a custom AI model for each brand or each search/alert for what is a relevant article. And it can then weed out the irrelevant ones, and the AI model just learns, okay, these are relevant, these are not, and it'll do that. So that's also in Propel. So yeah, some really exciting things, but I think also perhaps most exciting even above those is the prompt ability in a database, in a media database. So my agency, I don't know if you guys experience this, Darryl, but looking in a database and having to put in specific keywords, sort of predefined categories or whatnot, and then oftentimes they're too broad. Why not be able to use a prompt to search a media database? And in the prompt, why not be able to just put in even your pitch. So you can just copy paste in your pitch that you wrote or your press release and then get a media list. So that's also something we built into Propel. But yeah, a lot of exciting ways that AI is just completely transforming PR workflows. If anyone has any others that they've been doing, feel free to drop them in the chat and we can kind of address those as we go along. But Darryl, also wanted to ask you about ethical considerations. So, AI, there's a lot of concerns and people are a little skittish at times. Others are more confident. What are your one or two or three major points about ethics and how that relates to AI these days?
Yeah, I think it's really important. It's important that businesses create a clear policy framework for their staff, so their staff are clear on what's acceptable and what isn't, so they've got that license to operate. I think there are ethical considerations about the accuracy of content. We all know that AI hallucinates. Fact checking and checking the veracity of sources and data cited by AI is very important. It's very important that any numbers that you get in AI generated content, you manually, kind of fact check effectively to make sure they're okay. Secondly, and I touched on it earlier, but client confidentiality, never putting anything client confidential in free to air generative AI tools. Thirdly, use of AI generated imagery. We'd never misrepresent the truth or in any way like create fake imagery for anything for external consumption. And the fourth is about the biases that can exist, that can be programmed into AI. My partner is from the northeast of England and she has a very strong Geordie accent. Some of you guys might be familiar with Geordie Shore. She sounds a lot like the cast from Geordie Shore. Siri can't understand what she says. And I think it's an example of a bias that's programmed into AI. Because obviously the people that create Siri are all based in San Francisco or Palo Alto or wherever. So I think considering, and that's one example of where there are biases programmed into these AI platforms, and there are worse examples of that. But I think we all need to be very alive and very aware of that when we're using these platforms.
Yeah, and I think that from a vendor perspective, it's really important to build in guardrails to make sure that the AI is not getting into areas that it shouldn't, and also to be very clear in privacy policy in terms of use, what is being done, what's not being done. And so we've worked on that hard at Propel, spent a lot of effort to be as transparent as possible and to also listen to customers when they voice concerns and address those head on. So yeah, there are of course ethics concerns, but I think overwhelmingly AI is bringing benefit rather than risk. But yeah, I might be a little biased on that. So Darryl, another question: what would you say are the key traits that AI-driven models rely on when evaluating a brand's reputation? So how can PR teams leverage AI to boost their perceptions?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is relevant to the research that I'll take you guys through later. We looked at the impact of earned media and other material on the content that large language models produce about the world's 100 largest brands and their reputation into areas like quality, trust, innovation, and value. And we wanted to see how much influence earned media has over the content output from LLMs like ChatGPT. We looked at 4 pillars of reputation that we considered that most important to the world's most valuable brands. So that was quality, trustworthiness, innovation, and value for money. It would have been really interesting to look at some other potential pillars of reputation too, like ESG or CSR, just to see what AI models said in relation to that. But I think the key findings for us were, and we'll talk about it in more detail later, but just how important earned media I mean, and own media like your own website is, in terms of just shaping what AI is saying about brands. So if you want to be, helping have a positive impact on what AI is saying about either your clients or the brand that you work for, it is very much about making sure that your earned media is relevant in those areas. And in the right places, and your own media, like what you're saying about yourself on your website, is relevant to that too, and that your site is well optimized for search and all that other good stuff.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I'm looking forward to getting into the research in a few minutes. So, PR databases, media databases, obviously are a cornerstone for outreach. How do you see them evolving with the rise of AI? And then I'll share my perspective on that as the owner of a media database.
I think you've probably got more valuable perspectives on this than me, Zach. But just to kind of share with you my kind of perspective on this, absolutely. I think what you're saying about helping speed up finding relevant contacts for specific subjects is really important, right? And that goes in two different directions. The first is the data is up to date, that you know that journalist is still at that publication or covers that beat or whatever. And the second is, to your point, Zach, getting a quality assessment of, is this press release relevant to this journalist or this cohort of journalists. I think that's a really smart way of using AI. I think, more broadly, AI, and you were talking about it earlier, Zach, being able to help tailor approaches at scale to journalists, not to spam stuff out directly, but give you something that is tailored that you can then work with and then send on to journalists. I think that is really smart. I think AI can help you, but just at a very sort of top level, if you're using a platform like Propel or some other form of database for your interactions with journalists, like a CRM system or some form of database for your interactions with journalists, you're already in the top bracket of PR agencies or in-house PR functions that are doing this. Having a system of record for what you do and feeding data into it gives you an amazing resource to then use AI to get insights out of. And I think the next phase of evolution of that is predictive analytics. If you know, the example that I always use, for us would be a fundraising announcement, because it's quite easy, for a UK or European business, we know the audience of people who would be interested in taking a fundraising announcement for a business. It's a fairly set cohort of titles and journalists that work for those titles. We would know, based on the size of the announcement, the sector, all the rest of it, and when we pitched those media outlets and those journalists, what results we got the last 4 times we did a fundraising announcement. So then that gives us the ability to predict in the future, if we have a similar sized fundraise in a similar sector with decent level of probability, what we might secure for them doing a similar announcement. So that kind of predictive analytics, I think, is the next phase of AI. And if you've got a database for this stuff, it makes all that stuff in the future so much easier.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that if you look at, kind of zoom out and look at the PR journalism relationship, it's obviously been pretty fraught. It's been getting even worse. And I think that if you don't have a database that is using the most advanced AI algorithms to match the right input to the right journalists, and by input, I mean prompt, then you're going to get a massive list like legacy media databases offer, and you're going to end up spraying and praying, maybe 2%, maybe if you're lucky, 5% of your list might be, interested. But if you're getting a list of hundreds and hundreds of people and just a tiny percentage are relevant, it's just a disaster. I mean, you're spinning your wheels, wasting time, burning bridges with journalists. If you can have, instead of that old text-based matching, which the media databases use, and it can't be that specific because, as a category, they might have agriculture, but they're not going to get into hyper-specific niches within agriculture, like, let's say, potato yield. So we had a customer that was looking to find journalists writing about potato yield because they have a certain technology that helps farmers increase their potato yield. And so we went into Propel and we were able to show the customer that, look, just type in potato yield, not agriculture, and you're going to get like 50, 100, 200 journalists writing about that specific niche. And the only way that you can do that is if you have an AI media database that's based on prompts, it's based on algorithms from the leading LLMs and so on, and vectors and embeddings and all kinds of advanced things in AI that will allow that prompt to be matched to the right journalist. And I think that's just critical these days. And I think the other thing that's important is being able to look at pitches. So in Propel, we have the only Gmail and Outlook plugins in the industry where you can actually pitch journalists in your native email. And then we're able to use, in an aggregated, anonymized way, AI to understand what topics each journalist is engaging with most. And then we're able to present that on each journalist's profile in the media database. So we have these things in Propel, and I think that the whole industry is headed this way because, you can't, you have to be really targeted, really smart, really specific, and AI is the way to get there. So moving along, Darryl, what would you say, as the owner of Hard Numbers, which is a metrics-driven PR firm, what would you say are the top metrics that PR teams should focus on, as they're doing their PR efforts and trying to get good results?
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to media databases and outreach, there's a few. I've always been a big fan of Propel. It's the first media database, I think, to include not just reach for every outlet, but also domain authority, the measure by Moz for the quality of the website, and being able to understand the average DA of the sites that you've pitched, the average DA of the sites that you've secured coverage in and then secured a link from, is incredibly valuable when reporting back to clients. And being able to sort a media list by DA to be able to say, right, let's focus on the high DA stuff at the top, I think is really, really helpful. So that's one key metric, domain authority. In terms of tracking and reporting metrics for us, it's number of sends. So how many, and not a spray and pray approach. It's not about, said the most amount of sends that you can send, but just how many journalists went into the top of the funnel. It's not about maximizing that number, just understanding that number, because then that helps you understand the conversion rate as you move down that funnel, tracking the open rate to the of the email pitches you've sent to journalists, tracking positive replies or responses, and then the status of media opportunities that are created as a result. So is it new? Does the client know about it? Is it with us for drafting? Is it with the client for approval? Or is it with the journalist for publishing? And if you treat your, media like a sort of a sales funnel, like a funnel like that, and understand the conversion rates at each step of that journey, then you've then got rich data to help you get better and better and optimize your approach moving forward.
Yeah, I love that. And at my agency back in, before I started Propel, that was something that I dreamed of, having the open rate, the response rate, the publish rate, not only for each campaign and each client account, but also each team member, and really being able to understand who are the high performers, who needs more coaching, where are we putting in the most effort, where are we getting the best results. And Yeah, so that was actually the very first thing that we built in Propel over 5 years ago was that dashboard. So we're definitely of the same mind there. And if anyone on the call is not currently tracking engagement rates, like open rate, response rate, publish rate, definitely encourage you to start. It'll at the very least give you valuable insights on where you're putting your efforts and what's working and what's not. So next question, when it comes to measuring the ROI of earned media, how can PR teams ensure that their efforts are aligning with brand reputation, value, and trust, and so on?
Yeah, I think it's really important. There are a few things there. I think again, measuring the domain authority of the coverage, making an assessment of the quality of the coverage. Is it in a tier 1 outlet? The reach of the coverage. Those are all really important things to measure. I think being able to measure the presence of key messages for businesses in relation to those things like those reputation pillars like innovation, quality of product or service, value for money, etc., or other pillars of brand reputation that companies would track and would want to track, measuring their share of voice and their share of search versus their competitors. I think that share of search is actually a better kind of leading indicator, and I kind of see share of voice as maybe more of a lagging indicator potentially. But basically, you could see that if you're increasing your share of voice within target media consistently over time versus your competitors, you should hope that that would translate into a greater share of search versus your competitors. And I've always thought for a long time that PR folks should be the custodians of brand search within their organization. If you think about it, PPC and SEO folks are all about the generics, right? They're all about understanding the name, the product, or service that you are selling and duking it out for generic search, basically either paying for the traffic or creating on-site content to draw the traffic towards you. PR should be the custodian within the organization of brand search, and should really make the play that that's the area that they own and that they own responsibility for, and track the level of brand search for the organization versus its competitors.
Awesome. Yeah, and for measuring ROI from my perspective, there's two key pillars. One is the direct attribution. So clicks on the backlink in the article, how much traffic did that create? How much goal conversion did that create? But we all know that not every article about a brand is going to have a backlink. And even if it does, a reader might not click on the backlink. They might go and Google the company name later that day. And so how do you measure that? Well, that's general correlation. So you can look at the overall traffic to the brand's site over, let's say, the last week. And then you can look at the specific coverage that happened, the earned media coverage. And you can now say, oh, we had a huge spike in traffic on December 10th. Oh, that was the day that we had the massive New York Times feature about us. So we can generally correlate that article led to that spike. And same with goal conversion. So we built both of those into Propel. I think both are equally important because the direct attribution is precise, it's exact, and you can get a lot of insight from that. But the general correlation allows you to kind of zoom out and say, all right, well, what did we miss? What's the larger trend? And what sort of overall insights can we get from that? Okay, so let's move along, Darryl. So even with all of that said about ROI, I know that a lot of PR folks still struggle with it. Are there any other tips or tricks or insights you have for people today on how they can get started measuring ROI in a tangible way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you think about a number of tools and things that people can use, Google Analytics is free. Google Search Trends is free. Google Search Console is free. Look at Data Studio is free. Google Sheets is free. I'm not sponsored by Google, but those are all platforms that all integrate with one another and that you can get insights from that can really help build sophisticated dashboards that can help tell the story of your impact, exactly as you're saying, Zach, not just on in terms of coverage, but in terms of some kind of outcome, which is traffic to particular target landing pages on the client's website, things like that. Tracking, using Search Console to track keyword ranking improvements and things like that, or how much traffic is coming to the site from branded search versus non-branded search, that kind of thing, is incredibly valuable data to have. So, but completely free to get your hands on. So I think the key is you have to, if you work for an agency and you work with a client, it is non-negotiable that you have access to their Google Analytics and their Google Search Console, like non-negotiable. Like there is not a single client that we work with that we don't have access to those tools, or if for business reasons they don't use Google, a similar platform like Fathom or something like that. So you absolutely have to ask for those tools, and you have to invest some time and effort yourself in learning how to use them. But you really should, because you're missing a trick if you don't.
Couldn't agree more. GA is just critical. And whether you use it in a tool that's integrated or you use it on its own for free, like Darryl mentioned, definitely agree with that advice. And so I think with that, Darryl, we will get into a few slides of your recent study. So go ahead and take it from here, Darryl.
You are far too kind, Zach. Thanks very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk folks through this. So basically, I mentioned it earlier, but what we wanted to do with our latest Coverage to Capital report was to understand the relationship between how much earned media and clients' own media, their own websites, were shaping reputations as expressed on large language models like ChatGPT. So we wanted to understand across a range of different media how much of the opinions that, when asked about brands, ChatGPT sourced from earned media, own media, or other channels. So if you go to the next slide. Thank you, Zach. What we did is we basically took the top 100 global brands from research from Forbes, the most valuable brands in the world. We then set 4 key pillars of brand reputation: trust, quality, innovation, and value for money. And then in each case, we queried ChatGPT-4, asking what it knows about that company in relation to the quality of its products, its level of trustworthiness, innovation, or value for money. And then we asked Chat, when it came back, when it expressed an opinion, we asked it to credit the sources, to cite the sources it used. And we broke those sources down into own media, the client's own website; editorial media, earned media; customer reviews; analyst reports; and other sources, books and other stuff as well. So that was the methodology that we used. If you go to the next slide, Zach. So the good news for PR professionals and professional communicators and people who deal with earned media, editorial media, is that 61% of all LLM responses cited earned media as the source for the opinions that it was expressing in relation to the world's top 100 most valuable brands. And in some pillars of brand reputation, it was even higher. So within trust, for example, it was 65%. In value for money, it was 72%.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That's fascinating, Darryl. So, I mean, for all the folks watching, I mean, this is just tremendous validation of the continued importance of earned media. You can buy as many ads as you want. You can spend tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on Google ads alone, on all kinds of promotions and so on. But what Darryl's study powerfully shows here is that 61% of the LLM responses were, or 61% of the impact of how the LLM responded was based on earned media, not paid media. And I think as consumers and businesses are using LLMs constantly now to get information, to understand what tools to use, what products to use, et cetera, that's just fascinating. And I think that's excellent research. So I'll go to the next slide here, Darryl, or I think I skipped one. There you go.
Yeah, thank you very much. So what's interesting here is owned media as well. So this is the client's owned website and how frequently they were being cited by LLMs. It's interesting that very infrequently for value for money. So they don't take the brand's say so for what quality, what value for money that they offer, but for innovation, trust, and quality, the brand's own websites were very often cited. So, for innovation, it was 66% of the responses included a citation of the company's own website, for example. So what it goes to show is that own media is a very important part of the mix, as well.
And Darryl, what would you say is more important, earned or owned?
Oh, earned still came out, most important. And I think earned is more important for a couple of reasons as well. One, if you think about it, of course, an AI would cite, like the algorithm would be written to cite independent, objective, third-party opinion about something over a company's owned site. So I think that there's that natural. We all would say it, right? Like, and that's the value of PR and communications. I think is that to have it in an independent third party publication or opinion former to say something positive about your brand or product or service is more valuable than you saying it about yourself. So I think that tracks. I think the reason why owned media is important, though, is kind of a technical thing, and I didn't appreciate this before we got into the guts of the research, but was that if you think about it, the two most well optimized sort of types of sites online to be crawled and searched by search engines or some form of crawler are news media and company websites. And some of the other things like awards or analyst reports or books or things like that aren't as easily accessible by these large language models. So it kind of scans that, those are the two most prevalently quoted sources by LLMs as well.
Darryl, do you think paid media has any impact on LLMs and how it thinks of things?
We couldn't find any evidence of that. What's any meaningful evidence of any of that? Yeah. I think again because it would be the challenge of LLMs getting access to that, information. So, any PPC businesses are doing, or any outdoor, out of home, or any online or any other paid activations, we couldn't see any evidence of that being spidered or crawled and then subsequently included in any kind of scale in any of the responses that we looked at.
And this is just such wonderful news for our industry, because I know a lot of industries are nervous about how AI is going to upend it. Are people going to completely lose all their jobs, and companies are going to shut down left and right, and the industry will not survive? Or is it going to be the golden age? And I think Darryl and Hard Numbers research really points to the latter for PR and comms, because the LLMs are actually bringing even more importance to that third party credibility that we always knew was the cornerstone of our industry and the work we do. We always knew that getting an article in Forbes or the New York Times is 1,000 times more valuable than buying an ad in Forbes or the New York Times. But now that LLMs, according to Darryl's research, are so much more influenced by earned media than anything else when they give their answers, I mean, that just really is exciting news, I think, for the whole industry. And I think there's going to always be a place for it, an important place. So I'll go to the next slide here, Darryl. There we go.
Yeah. I mean, this is the one that if you want to screenshot it and include it in your client presentations from here on out, folks, you're more than welcome to. I mean, basically, what this says is that 61% of all responses were generated by, were sourced or cited earned media, but that for value for money and for trust, for example, they were even higher, like 65% and 72%. To your point, Zach, there's a saying in the UK, given that many of your audience are from places like Wisconsin and Mexico and Reno and Cleveland, might not be familiar with, but we say about the media that it's fish and chip paper tomorrow. And that harks back to a time when fish and chips, which is our national dish, was wrapped in newspapers, speaking to the disposable, ephemeral nature of newspapers. But clearly, that old adage, it is meaningless now, because earned media, the printed word, and as a result, online word as well, has this much longer shelf life and half life in LLMs. And what we're seeing is that there is a value, just in the same way that there's a huge value to securing coverage with a backlink to a target landing page on your website, has a beneficial impact in SEO. So that's useful for people to know, PR professionals to know as an ancillary benefit to their work. Similarly, knowing that there are sources that earned media sources that are being regularly picked up within LLMs and those opinions are being cited is incredibly valuable, because you then know the places to secure coverage and the kinds of things to be talking about with them, and that is going to have a much longer shelf life than just getting coverage for someone.
Yeah, you reminded
LLM means large language model. Sorry, I always try to explain abbreviations, and I always say you should talk in words that your mum can understand. So apologies for someone for not having explained that earlier. Thank you, Todd.
I agree with the long shelf life thing, Darryl. Recently, I was using ChatGPT and I saw something that mentioned about how Propel was the David versus Goliath of the industry. And it made me realize, wow, there was an article 5 years ago in Forbes that called us the David of the industry versus Goliath. Yeah. And it literally pulled that. And I think Darryl's research is just such a wonderful breath of fresh air for our industry. And I'm really glad that we had you on to share that, Darryl. And yeah, it's going to be a golden age for comms, for PR, for earned media. I have no doubt. And thanks again, Darryl. And now let's open up for Q&A. So does anyone have questions for Darryl, for myself? We had some previous audience questions that got submitted. So I have a couple here, Darryl, that we can start with. So how can AI tools help maximize the impact of editorial content?
Well, I think the research that we've shown here definitely is one way in which we can AI can help maximize the impact of editorial content. I think another way is, and by the way, whenever we talk about, I think there was a question in the Q&A from Lorraine Hall about journalists complaining about AI generated content and things like that. I think it's important to, whenever we talk about using AI to help generate content, what I don't think any of us are doing is talking about generating content at scale that doesn't have someone looking at it ultimately, who is a person that has a more nuanced understanding of the client, the media, the media, the messages that the client wants to express, or whatever. So when I'm talking about using AI to help create content, I never mean to go out without someone having looked and edited it something. But what AI is great at doing is, I had this the other day. We secured some editorial coverage from this report. This sounds a bit like the snake eating its own tail, but anyway, I then went to ChatGPT. I have a custom GPT that basically has seen everything I've ever written, and I went to it and said, basically, in my tone of voice, look, please look at this article and write me a post about this article in relation to our coverage. And it gave me, probably 75% of what I finally used, but it very quickly turned it into something. Another someone who we shared this report with turned it into a podcast using this tool from Google. To basically, you give it a long form piece of content, a report, and it turns it into a podcast that you can then listen to when you're out and about or going or whatever. And I found that an incredible use of AI to repurpose content into another medium entirely without having any cost associated with it whatsoever. So that's another way in which AI can help repurpose or reuse editorial media.
Yeah, thanks, Darryl. We have another question. Do you know if and how much Cision, Meltwater, and Prowly are incorporating AI? Are these your competitors? So, Lauren, yeah. So what we've heard from a lot of customers and agencies and in-house teams that we talk to is that the legacy tools in the industry that you mentioned and others have either not integrated any AI or they've integrated a little bit of AI in more of a wrapper format. So perhaps a simple press release writer, which, kind of pulls in from OpenAI, or a simple pitch writer, that kind of thing. But no substantive AI at all that we've heard of or seen. And so that's what we've been excited at Propel over the last couple of years. Is this has really been our mission. We've worked day and night to do it. And like I said, I come from the industry. We come from the industry. And so we're really passionate about bringing the best innovation and really helping to move our industry forward. And there's nothing like AI personalized intros, AI prompts in the media database, and AI monitoring, which I mentioned about relevancy training and also crisis comms training. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Have another question here about, this was an anonymous question. The person said that they used ChatGPT to generate a press release. And they were upset for a variety of reasons because the result was extremely good. And so they're wondering, how do we as PR professionals protect our creative ability to do this work? And how do we protect against our field being replaced in the near future? So I'll just add a quick comment, and then Darryl, would love your perspective on that too. The way I look at it is that AI is not replacing PR people. It's actually allowing PR people to automate the busy work. My guest last webinar, Jenny Dietrich, founder of SpinSucks and the Peso model, she said that she always thinks about AI as her intern and that it's a PR person's intern. So you can train it to do all of the busy work, all of the things that are repetitive, perhaps mundane in the PR workflow, so that it frees you up to do more of the really creative human aspects of the job, the strategic, thinking of a really creative story, developing a relationships with a journalist, getting to know a client better. These kinds of really human, substantive parts of the job that are really creative. And so I think that it's a symbiotic relationship. And I think that if I was a PR person today rather than running Propel, I would probably be quite happy because I'd be able to do most of the parts of the job that I always loved the most. But Darryl, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's a really good, very thoughtful response, Zach. I think I think the person that asked that question sounds like a freelance PR person or a sort of solo practitioner or something like that. If I was doing that job now, I would write down just like two columns, really simple: grunt work, front work. Right? What is it that I do that is highly repetitive, boring, like tedious, low value, that if I had someone who worked for me that was a junior, I would give them to do? That goes in the grunt work column. Front work is anything which is high value, right? Either to do with building relationships with clients, building relationships with journalists. It's anything that you would basically put in the bucket: creativity, coming up with ideas, things like that. That's front work. And I would then work as hard as I can on outsourcing or getting AI to do as much of the grunt work stuff as I possibly can. And I would focus my time and effort on the front work stuff because that is higher perceived value by clients and therefore is something that you can charge a premium for. And I think as the industry will, change in it, and client expectations are going to change in relation to budgets and service models and things like that. That is the way in which I would approach coming up with a new way of doing business and doing PR and communications work that will be a more future-proof model.
And just to wrap up, Lorraine says, I've seen on LinkedIn several journalists complaining loudly about AI generated pitches and lack of thought. And that, Lorraine, is the importance of being really well versed in how to write a good prompt. If you're going to use AI, use it smartly, learn how to prompt well so that your output isn't vanilla sounding, or use a tool like Propel or another that has put that deep thought into it. But I know that we are running out of time. Darryl, how do people reach you if they want to learn more?
If they want to learn more, I'm at Darryl Sparey, DARRYLSPAREY, on just about any platform. And I will put in the chat now the link to the Coverage to Capital research. Please, if anyone is interested in it, download, have a read. My DMs on all platforms are open. If you've got any questions, comments, thoughts, or anything, very happy to hear from you.
And thank you, Darryl, for sharing this really unique and powerful research. Thank you, everyone, for joining. We do these Propel webinars every month, so we look forward to seeing you on the next one, and wishing everyone a happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, whatever you celebrate. And thanks again, Darryl. Great to have you.
Fantastic. Thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.